They told you that your best years were behind you. But what if they were wrong? What if the years ahead of you hold a freedom, wisdom, and peace that your younger self could never fully understand? Today, I want to share timeless lessons inspired by the words of an elder woman who lived through more than 80 winters and discovered something remarkable. As the years pass, certain burdens finally begin to fall away. The need for approval grows quieter. The pressure to be everything for everyone starts to loosen its grip. And in that newfound space, many women begin to hear their own voice again. In this video, we will explore 6 powerful truths about aging as a woman. The freedom that comes when old expectations fade. The strength hidden within a lifetime of experience. The surprising wisdom of the changing body. The transformation that can emerge from grief. And the lasting fire every woman carries within her. Stay with me until the end, because the final lesson may completely change the way you see this stage of life. The most meaningful chapter of your story may not be behind you at all. It may be just beginning.
They told you the best years were behind you. They were wrong. I am going to tell you something today that most people will never understand. Something my grandmother whispered to me beside a fire when I was still a young woman. Something I did not fully believe until I had lived enough winters to know it in my bones. The years you are living right now, or the ones coming toward you, these are not the end of something beautiful. They are the beginning of it. Stay with me, because what I am about to share has been kept alive for generations, passed from elder to elder, woman to woman, around fires that burned long after the rest of the world had gone to sleep. And it was kept alive for a reason. It was kept alive for you. My name is not important. What matters is that I have seen 83 winters come and go. I have watched snow bury the mountains and melt away again. I have held newborns and held the hands of the dying. I have laughed until the earth shook beneath me, and I have wept until I thought there was nothing left inside me to give. And I am here to tell you, the woman I am today is the freest, most rooted, most awake woman I have ever been. That is not an accident. That is design. Lesson 1. The pressure. That finally lifts. Close your eyes for a moment and think about your younger self. Think about her shoulders. Were they ever truly relaxed? For most women, the answer is no. From the time we are girls, we are handed a weight we did not ask for. Be beautiful enough, be small enough, be agreeable enough, raise the children well enough, hold the family together, hold your feelings together, hold yourself together, but not too visibly, not too loudly, not in a way that makes anyone uncomfortable. There is a story I carry with me about a woman in our community named Running Deer. She was a strong woman, a quiet woman, someone who fed her family through drought years and sorrow years and years when the river ran low. And one morning, when she was perhaps 62 or 63 winters old, her youngest child left the home to begin their own journey. Running Deer stood in the doorway of her dwelling for a long time that morning. Her daughter, watching from a distance, feared she was grieving, but when Running Deer finally turned around, her face was not sad. It was open, like a sky after a storm clears, like the first warm morning of spring when you step outside and the air touches your skin, and you realize the cold is not just gone for today, but truly, finally gone. She told her daughter, "I have been carrying a river on my back for 40 years. Today I set it down. Today I remember that I am not the river, I am the bank, and the bank was here before the river came, and it will be here long after." This is the first truth the ancient ones understood about aging in women. The lifting of external pressure is not a loss. It is a return to yourself, the self that existed before the world's expectations climbed onto your shoulders and made themselves at home there. After 60, many women begin to feel this. The fierce need to be approved of slowly fades. The exhausting work of managing everyone else's emotions begins to soften. And in that newly quiet space, something extraordinary happens. You begin to hear yourself again, perhaps for the first time in decades, perhaps for the first time ever. And what you hear, when you finally listen, will surprise you. Lesson 2. Wisdom wears no apology. Here is something the modern world has deeply confused. It has mistaken softness for weakness and silence for surrender. But in the old ways, the elder women were not quiet because they had nothing to say. They were quiet because they had learned when to speak, and what they said, when they did speak, could change the direction of a life. I want you to consider what you have survived. Consider the losses, the reinventions, the years you pushed through when you did not know how you would push through. Consider the relationships you navigated, the griefs you metabolized, the moments you found a way forward when the path had completely disappeared beneath your feet. That knowledge lives in you, not in books, not in degrees hanging on a wall, in your body, in your intuition, in the way you can look at a situation now and know, without anyone telling you, what is real and what is merely performance. There was a woman in our tradition, an elder called Many Feathers, who was known across several communities for her counsel. People would travel, sometimes for days, to sit with her and ask for her perspective on difficult matters. She was not formally trained in any way the outside world would recognize. She had simply lived deeply. She had paid attention. She had made mistakes and learned from them without turning her mistakes into permanent stories about her worth. When young people asked her how she became so wise, she would smile and say, "I have simply stopped lying to myself. That is all wisdom is. The truth you kept postponing. After 60, the truth becomes easier to face." The defenses we built in younger years to protect us begin to feel unnecessary, like a coat worn indoors long after the winter has passed. We become less afraid of what we might find if we look honestly at our lives, because we have already survived so much looking. We have already faced things that we once thought would destroy us, and we are still here, still standing, still breathing the morning air. This is not weakness. This is mastery, and it belongs to you. Lesson 3. The body becomes a teacher, not an enemy now. I know what you may be thinking. You may be thinking of the aches, the slower mornings, the ways the body requires more patience, more care, more conversation than it once did. I hear that. I honor that. I'm not going to stand here and pretend that physical aging carries no challenge, but I want to offer you a different frame, one the ancient ones used, one that changed everything for the women who received it. In our tradition, when the body begins to slow, it is not seen as betrayal. It is seen as invitation. The body that once carried you at full speed through the demands of the world is now asking you to go at the pace of the earth itself, to notice things you ran past before, to breathe more consciously, to move with intention rather than urgency, to stop performing speed and begin practicing presence. There was a grandmother in our community, we called her Soft Wind, who developed a painful stiffness in her hands in her later years. She had been a potter her whole life, shaping clay with powerful, confident hands, and the change in her hands was, at first, devastating to her. She grieved those hands. She sat with that grief for a full season. But Soft Wind did not stop working with clay. She changed how she worked with it. She moved slower. She pressed less hard. She listened to what the clay was willing to become, rather than forcing it into what she had always made. And in doing so, she discovered textures and forms she had never created before. Delicate impressions, subtle curves, work so fine and honest that younger potters would hold it in their hands and go quiet with something close to reverence. She said, "My hands became my greatest teachers when they stopped doing what I told them and started asking me to listen. Your body in these years is not failing you. It is refining you. It is teaching you the one lesson that all the rushing of earlier life made impossible to learn, that life is not meant to be sprinted. It is meant to be felt, fully, slowly, with all of your attention turned toward it like a face turned toward the sun." Lesson 4. The permission you stopped waiting for. Here is perhaps the most radical teaching of all, and I want you to hear it carefully. For most of a woman's life, she waits for permission. Permission to speak her full truth. Permission to rest without justification. Permission to want what she wants without shrinking it first. Permission to be exactly who she is, completely, unapologetically, without editing herself for someone else's comfort. She waits for that permission from her parents, her partners, her children, her community, her culture. She waits and waits, and sometimes she waits her entire life and it never comes, because it was never coming from outside. It was never anyone else's to give. I want to tell you about a woman who came to our elder circle many years ago. She had traveled a long distance to be there. She was 67 years old, and she had spent her whole life doing what was expected of her. She had been a devoted wife, a present mother, a reliable daughter, a steady presence for everyone around her. She had folded herself again and again into whatever shape was needed. She was very good at folding. And now, with her children grown and her marriage ended and her working years behind her, she sat in our circle and said with a voice that had clearly carried this question for a long time, "I don't know who I am. I have never known who I am, and I think it may be too late to find out." The circle was quiet. And then one of our oldest elders, a woman of 91 winters, who wore her white hair loose down her back and had eyes that looked as though they had seen every kind of human sorrow and come through to something clear on the other side, looked at this woman for a long time before she spoke, and then she said, quietly and without drama, "The seed does not apologize for becoming a tree simply because it took a long time to find the right soil. You have spent 67 years finding your soil. Now grow." That woman stayed with us for a season. She learned to sit in silence without filling it. She learned to make things with her hands for no reason other than the pleasure of making. She learned to say what she thought without first running it through the long, exhausting filter of, will this upset someone? Will this make me seem too much? Will this cost me something I cannot afford to lose? She left different, not younger, freer. And freedom, as any elder will tell you, is the only youth worth having. The permission was never coming from outside. It was waiting inside the whole time, patient as stone, certain as the turning of seasons. Lesson 5. Grief as initiation, not destination. I will not pretend that these years carry no sorrow. They do, and the sorrow deserves to be spoken honestly. The losses of later life, of dear friends, of partners who knew us when we were young, of our own capacities we once took for granted, of people we loved fiercely who left before we were ready. These are real and they are heavy, and they deserve to be honored with full feeling rather than rushed past. But in the ancient understanding, grief was not a place to avoid or escape or medicate into silence. Grief was a threshold, a doorway that if you walked through it consciously rather than running from it, led somewhere you could not reach any other way. The women in our tradition who were the most alive, the most luminous in their later years, the most genuinely at peace, they were not the ones who had been spared from suffering. They were the ones who had moved through it completely, who had cried every tear that needed crying, who had sat with the emptiness long enough for it to transform, who had, when the season of grief had finally done its full work, found themselves standing in a clearing that could not have been reached by any other path. We carry a teaching that has lived in our community for longer than anyone can remember. The tree that weathers the storm does not lose its roots. It deepens them. Every loss you have carried hasn't made you less. It has rooted you deeper into the earth of who you truly are. The woman who has known real grief knows something the untested woman does not. She knows she can survive the unsurvivable. She knows her own depth. She knows that the floor holds even when everything above it gives way. And that knowledge becomes a quiet, unshakable courage that lives in the chest like a steady ember that nothing, no wind, no cold, no darkness can extinguish. Do not rush past your grief. Do not perform recovery for anyone else's comfort or timeline. Let the season complete itself, because on the other side of it, and there is always another side, I promise you this from 83 winters of watching, you will find a capacity for joy that is unlike anything you felt in younger years. Not the bright, anxious joy of youth that always carries beneath it the shadow of, will this last? Am I allowed to feel this? What will I owe for this happiness? But the deep, grateful, fully present joy of a woman who knows exactly how precious this moment is, because she has known what it means to lose, and she is still here, and the light is still beautiful, and that is enough. That is more than enough. Lesson 6. The fire you were always meant to carry. And now I want to speak to you about the thing that matters most. Not legacy in the way the world usually means it, not accomplishments recorded in formal places, not names carved into permanent surfaces. The other kind of legacy, the kind that travels person to person, hand to hand, in a glance across a room or a truth spoken quietly at exactly the right moment. In our tradition, the elder women were called the keepers of the fire, not only because they tended the literal flames, though they did, but because they held something alive that would otherwise grow dark without them. They held the memory of how to be fully human, how to sit with someone in pain without rushing to fix it or minimize it or turn away from it, how to tell a hard truth in a way that opens rather than wounds, how to find the sacred inside the ordinary, inside the morning light on water, inside a shared meal, inside the unremarkable Tuesday that will never come again, how to laugh at precisely the right moment and weep at the right moment and be completely still when stillness is the most powerful and generous thing you can offer. This is what the later years of a woman's life are for, not for diminishing, not for disappearing quietly into the margins while the younger world moves loudly past, for transmitting, for being seen, for letting what you have learned and survived and become travel forward into lives that desperately need what only you can give. Every young woman struggling with her worth, her direction, her terror of the future, she needs to see you. She needs to see a woman who has been through the fire and come out not burned away, but refined. She needs to see what it actually looks like to age without apology, to speak without needing applause, to rest without guilt, to love generously without losing yourself in that loving, to be rooted so deeply in who you are that no opinion, no cultural pressure, no passing season can uproot you. You may not stand in any formal circle. You may not consider yourself a teacher or a guide or an elder in any official sense. But every time you live these truths, every single time, you choose presence over performance, honesty over approval, depth over speed, your own knowing over someone else's noise, you are teaching. Simply by being seen doing it, simply by existing as proof that this way of being is possible. That is the fire you carry. Do not underestimate it. Do not hide it. Do not let anyone convince you that it has grown too small to matter. So let me say this to you now, in the way my grandmother said it to me beside the fire when the night was quiet and the stars were very close, and the world felt both very large and very intimate at once, in the way her grandmother said it to her, in the way this teaching has traveled across more generations than I can count, like a river that knows exactly where it is going, even when the path curves and the banks change and the season turns cold. You are not at the end of your story. You're at the part of the story that every earlier chapter was preparing you for, the part where the woman finally stops running and turns around to face herself fully and discovers that what she finds there is not frightening at all, not diminished, not finished, but weathered and warm and real in a way that polished, hurrying youth never quite manages to be. The ancient ones did not fear growing old. They prepared for it the way they prepared for the most sacred ceremony of their lives. They understood that the woman who has lived deeply, loved fully, suffered honestly, and continued anyway, is not a lesser version of the younger woman. She is a truer one. So tonight, when the light changes and the day softens into evening, I invite you to sit somewhere quiet, outside if you are able, where the sky is above you, and the air is real against your skin, and the world is doing what it always does, turning slowly and without hurry through its ancient rhythms. And I want you to ask yourself, without judgment, without rushing toward an answer, without needing it to be anything other than what it honestly is, what is it that I've been waiting for permission to be? And then, and this is the teaching, this is the whole teaching carried in a single breath, be it, not when the circumstances are perfect, not when everyone around you is comfortable with it, not tomorrow, now, in whatever small, true, quietly courageous way is available to you in this exact moment of your one and only life. The fire is still burning. You are still burning, and the most beautiful part of your story has not yet been told.